Morning. Good morning. We're going to talk for just a couple minutes here. Let's see if we can get a couple people on. Let's share if we can, please, and tap if you can. I'm gonna talk about the law and the limits of law. Somebody asked a question, and I started writing about it and started putting together some concepts, and it just flowed really well this morning. So I want to kind of talk about those things with you and help us understand how the law creates limits and how those limits cannot be exceeded because the law creates limits. So you guys can join or can share. That would be great. And so I'm getting ready to check out of here because once again, I'm operating within my own laws. God's created laws and limits, and I'm getting ready to check out of here because once again, I'm operating within my own laws. God's created laws and limits, and I have to live within those limits, and I can't live outside of those limits. So if the limit is I don't have a place to stay at the moment, then I have to accept those limits because the law has imposed them upon me. So this concept of the law, a law is created so that it can provide limits. You know, when a law that's limitless would be God, right? Only God is able to exceed all limits, and he creates the limits for us, the tangible object. I'm a tangible object, and my existence only is within what the intangible, what the law permits me to live within. Take, for instance, the law of gravity. We know that the law of gravity exists, right? We can't see it, but we know that there is a law of gravity. We know that there's certain ramifications if we as a tangible object choose to see it, but we know that there is a law of gravity. We know that there's certain ramifications if we as a tangible object choose to exceed the limits that have been imposed upon us. See, we're an agent of the law of gravity. God has given us the law of gravity, and he said that you're going to live and be tangible, and your existence will be defined within the limits that I've imposed upon you by the law. So when he creates a law with limits, we as an agent of that law, if we choose to willfully breach those limits, then we must be punished because the law itself cannot change. It's not fluid, it is absolute. Because without an absolute law, it can't be a law. Because the law can only be intangible based upon the parameters that it's been established and created. So take this concept of judges, right? The judge's existence, the tangible object that was created by the law, has limits, and those limits cannot be exceeded by that which is tangible because those limits are what created the tangible object, the judge. So just like us and the law of gravity that God has imposed upon us, if I choose through my willful decision making to go to the top of a building and jump off that building knowing that I have limits, then I've exceeded the limits that the law has imposed upon me, and it's going to come with punishment. I know that. That's why I will not go and jump off of the roof of a building, because I don't want to exceed the limits that have been placed upon me. Even though I know that I can, I know that it comes with punishment. I know that it comes with certain penalties that are imposed, and that penalty would be death. You know, and so when we choose to live outside of the parameters of our own existence by the laws that limit us, then we ourselves must be punished for such limit. And the law must do it. The law can't pick and choose. It can't say, oh, I like you, Tanoa. I'm not going to punish you for exceeding the law. No, the law is absolute because it creates the parameters. It creates the world that we live in. So when God creates a law, such as the law of gravity, then we ourselves, as the steward of that law, as being imposed by it, we cannot exceed the very law that creates us, that limits our existence. Neither can a judge. So the law itself, it can never exceed itself. The law is absolute because the very definition of a law would be limit, right? The law itself, it can never exceed itself. The law is absolute because the very definition of a law would be limit, right? The law creates limits. The law itself, it can never exceed itself. The law is absolute because the very definition of a law would be limit. Right? The law creates limits, and those very definition of a law would be limit, right? The law creates limits, and those very definition of a law would be limit, right? The law creates limits, and those limits are that they have to reside within. They have to be bound by. So when you talk about like a court, right? The court and the law are intertwined with one another because the court is an intangible object. It's nothing. It's just a court. It's just a building and an institution. The law itself is nothing also because it's an intangible. It's not alive and changing. It itself has limits, and those limits cannot be exceeded by itself because it itself cannot exceed because it's intangible, right? We, as the intangible agent, we have the free will and ability to make a decision out of obedience and respect and love for our Creator or the limits that our Creator has placed upon us. But those limits come with penalty if we choose to exceed those limits. And that would be applicable to all laws. It doesn't matter what the law is. The law must come with penalties because otherwise the law has no force. It has no effect. And so, when you take this concept of sovereign immunity and you say that the very object that binds you and restrains you to certain parameters, that it will protect you when you choose to exceed it, is an absurd thought. Because the law itself cannot protect something that's outside of its own existence. If you are not operating within the authority or within the parameters of the authority that's granted you your existence, then you're operating outside of that law, which means that the law can't protect you when you are acting outside of where it's at. You can only receive protection when you are operating within the parameters and the limitations that's been placed upon you. Just like me, I go on top of this building here. I know damn good and well that there is the law of gravity. I know damn good and well that there are certain limits that I have in my existence. And I also know that I can willfully choose to exceed those limits, but it will come with a punishment. And that punishment is based upon the severity of which I breach the obligation of obedience to those laws. So I could be punished anywhere from hurting myself to death, depending again on the severity of the break. If I willfully choose, not just willfully, if I negligently choose to exceed the parameters of the law, it doesn't matter. I'm still exceeding it, and I still must be punished by it because the law itself cannot change. It's not fluid. The law has limits. The limits are documented. They're defined, and when those limits are exceeded by the tangible object created by those limits, the limits cannot protect them. It must punish them. And it can be anywhere in severity from injury to death. But unfortunately, our laws upon public officials, we've already defined that the punishment is death, right? We've told them that if you operate outside of your authority, outside of the laws, the parameters that's established by the law, if you operate outside of that, the punishment is death. It's the same as me walking on top of a skyscraper and saying, I'm not going to obey you, God. I know that you've imposed certain limits on my existence as a tangible, created object or creation of you, and I'm going to disobey you, God, and I'm going to breach the limits that you placed upon me, willfully or negligent. You're gonna give me the punishment of death. We know that. Okay, so again, the court itself is nothing. The court itself can't change because it's intangible. It has no life. It has no ability to change. So when the institution is created through limits, because it's intangible. It has no life. It has no ability to change. So when the institution is created through limits and parameters, itself can't change, which is why, this concept of immunity, a lot of people they just don't understand that the agent itself, right? The tangible object that's created by the parameters of the law, the agent itself cannot be immune from them exceeding the limitations of that which created them. If the law creates the created, the judge, and then the judge exceeds the very thing that created it, it can't be protected because that which created, the law can't change. So again, if you consider the law that's created by man, because God creates a law and then we create certain laws as man to limit that which we create, because the judges they don't create the people. The people create the judge, because we create the law, which created the jurisdiction, which created the court, which created the court's agent. So the court's agent is the bottom of the totem pole, not the top. So the bottom of the totem pole, that which is created cannot change that which created it, because that which created it is intangible and and limited, because it's created by something else. So when we create the limits of the law, and then that which the limits of the law create the judge The judge has no power to create, to change or alter that which was created, because it must be done by the creation or the creator of the law, the people. And when the people don't change the parameters of the law, then the created, the object which is created by law, they are then violating the law, willfully or negligently, and that must come with a penalty, just like any other law. Because without a penalty, there is no force, there is no effect. The law has no validity, because there must be a ramification for the exceeding of the law. So judges and prosecutors and all these other people that are limited by the law itself, they cannot exceed those limits. They can't do it willfully or negligently, because if they do, then there is no law. And if there is no law, then there is no judge, because the judge only exists because of the limits of the law. So if we don't have a punishment for the limitations of the law, then that would void and negate the law's own existence, which would then also negate and void the judge's existence. Because without the law and the limitations imposed by law, that which is created by that law would not exist either. So the judges, they're not immune from their criminal liability. If you choose willfully or negligently to break the law, just like if I walk up on the roof of this building and I choose to jump off this roof, I know that the law of gravity exists. I know that it comes with certain penalties for me willfully or negligently choosing to breach the limitations that have been placed upon me. The law must impose those penalties upon me, because without those penalties, that law has no force or effect. It wouldn't be a law. Therefore, there wouldn't be any limitations. But the court itself can't break the law, because the law and the court are statute. They're fixed. They're not fluid. They're not living. They can't change themselves, because they're an intangible object. So when the agent, who is the creation of the court, the creation of the law, when the agent or the judge, when they choose to break the law, the court can't follow them into that place, because the court can't breach the very parameters of its existence, because it's not a living object. It doesn't have free will. It has limits, and those limits are absolute, because it's not a living object. It doesn't have free will. So when the agent does exceed its free will, breaching the limitations that's been placed upon its existence, it is committing a crime or sin, right? And that must accompany punishment. But the action of the court that was created by that agent who's acting without lawful authority, it's without force or effect, because the court will not impose upon someone something that it itself can't do. Even if the agent creates a judgment, that judgment is created outside of the court itself's lawful authority, and the court cannot create a judgment that is outside of its existence. So the whole point here is that, again, when you want to go to the courts and you want to say to the court that my judgment isn't valid, when you want to appeal a judgment, you want to challenge the existence of judgment, you have to start with the actions of the agent, the criminal acts or the breaching of the law. That's why most civil rights cases fail in procedural default, because before you can claim that your rights have been violated, you must first show that someone had a limit placed upon them. Someone had a law that they had to comply with. And when they broke that law, then the intangible object, that which is created, has a punishment that it must face for the actions of its agent, because it must hold its agent accountable for the crimes. Otherwise, it has no validity of existence either. So before you can sue for damages because your rights have been violated, we must first show that someone had a duty to act and they breached that duty. That's a breaking of the law. We got to go with the first step. We have to hold the agents criminally liable when they exceeded the limits that were imposed upon them by the inflexible, intangible law that was created. And once we do that, then you guys can show that your rights have been violated, and now you need to be compensated by the agent's master, by the court. Because what the court created wasn't real, and the court knows that. His master, by the court. Because what the court created wasn't real, and the court knows that. The court is master by the court. Because what the court created wasn't real, and the court knows that. The court is master by the court. Because what the court created wasn't real, and the court knows that. Court, and those penalties can be significant, anywhere from injury to death, depending on the severity of the break. I don't want to break it. So I must obey those parameters in my existence, my tangible existence. I must obey the parameters that have been placed upon me, because that's a law that's been imposed upon me. And those limits my powers and my actions. If I willfully or negligently choose to exceed the limit, of the law of gravity that has been imposed upon me by the breaking of the law, then exceeding the authority that's been placed upon me by the law itself must now punish me because the law cannot change. It is a law with limited existence in and of itself. So again, if a law does not have a penalty for the limits that it's established, then it is not a law, because a law by definition must have limits of authority. Again, when God creates laws, those laws come with parameters. They come with parameters and limits that he's placed upon that which he creates. And if those that he creates willfully chooses to disrespect the creator and exceed the limits that have been placed upon them, then God must punish them for such acts of disobedience. So when we create the law that creates the judge, then we must look at that law with those limits, and we must say that you must be punished, because otherwise the law has no existence. It has no authority, it has no power, it has no force. Judges do not have the authority to change the law, because judges didn't create the law, right? Judges were created by the law. Therefore, that which is created cannot be above the creator, cannot exceed the power, authority, statutorily conferred upon it, because that which creates it cannot be changed by that decree. Only the people can change law. We've never changed law. We've never expanded the judicial authority. We've never permitted the judges to be able to act in an arbitrary manner to lock people up and enslave us. We never granted them that authority as the creator of the laws and that which limits those judges. So we have to start with the first step of agents. You broke the law. And this is what we're working on. Like this is what's so difficult right now, is that we have to figure out a way right now to get these judges to be held accountable for their obvious willful exceeding or negligent exceeding of the very limits that have been placed upon them. And again, those limits cannot be changed. The law is not fluid. The law is law. Dura lex, sed lex. It may be hard, but it's the law. So just like I must obey the limits that my creator placed upon me, and I don't go up on the roof and jump off the roof because I know that there's going to be penalties for such breach of free will and lawful obligation. I know that those come with penalties, and I don't want to face those penalties. So I'm going to obey the law, respect the law, because I know that the supreme creator has placed those upon me, and I respect him for them. You all understand that. You can't see, smell, taste, feel, or hear gravity, but we know it's a law. And we know that law is accompanied with punishment, should we choose to break those limits. So again, the same concept for a judge. If a judge has certain limits that's been placed upon it by us, the creator, then that which is created cannot willfully or negligently exceed the limits that's been placed upon it without facing a punishment. Because without punishment, there is no law. What is created cannot willfully or negligently exceed the limits that's been placed upon it without facing a punishment. Because without punishment, there is no law. There must be force or effect in order to make a law valid. I think Paul even talked about this in Romans. He said that the law itself isn't bad, that it's not the law itself that anybody will obey, because without fear of punishment, the law has no force, it has no power. It's just the law, it's words. But if the law itself comes with fear of punishment or fear of penalty, then the law comes alive and it limits us, and it makes us adhere to those limits because we're afraid of what would happen to us should we choose to exceed those limits. So when God says to me, don't go up on this roof and jump off it because I will punish you for exceeding those limits of the law that I placed upon you, then I must respect my creator and say, I'm not going to do it, right? But if I could do it, if I could go up on top of this roof, jump off of it, and not face a punishment, then that law has no force. I don't need to be afraid of it, right? And therefore, I won't obey it because there we go, So the law only has power if it has fear of punishment or fear of penalty. And these judges today have no fear of penalty. So the law only has power if it has fear of punishment or fear of penalty. And these judges today have no fear of penalty. Exceed it at their discretion anytime they want, and then it's going to protect them through this concept of sovereign bucket immunity, right? Anytime they want, and then it's going to protect them through this concept of sovereign bucket immunity, right? And so the law has no force right now. It has no power because we ourselves are not enforcing the limits that exist upon those that are created. We have to bring this fear back. That's what they do on you guys every day. Like that's why you guys are running out here, running from the police because you have a fear that they're going to punish you, right? They use that weapon of law against you all the time to get you to comply with the limits that they want to impose upon you, right? And you guys comply because of the fear of punishment that accompanies that law. Oh, they're going to put you into jail. They're going to put you in prison. So you obey the law because of the fear of the force, the fear of punishment. But when the judges can do whatever they want, they don't have to follow the law. They don't have to. Then when they can do whatever they want, then they have no fear of punishment. Despite the fact that our law permits us to hold them accountable to the penalty of death. Our law permits that. We are lawfully able to hold them accountable to the extent of death for them breaking those laws. We are lawfully allowed to do that. God has justified such actions under our law. And they know this. That's why they're so scared right now, right? That's why they're acting in such a forceful way toward all of you when you walk in that courtroom. Because just as the author George Orwell said in his book 1984, that a tyrant will rule by fraud or force. But when the fraud is exposed, all they have left is to rule by his force. And so we've exposed this fraud. We can see them for what they are now. They're criminals. Every single fucking one of them. They are all traitors. They are all, claiming to be experts in the law when they've never obeyed the law, which doesn't make you an expert. That makes you a fool and a criminal. So they're not what they say that they are. They're wearing this mask, this illusion of perfection, this illusion of honor, when we've exposed them for the fraud that they are, all the way to the very top of this fucking institution, and yet they still wear this mask because they don't want this mask to fall. They don't want this mask to fall. They don't want you guys to see them for what they really. They don't want the public to see them for what they really are, because they're afraid of what will happen. Because guess what? What will happen will come with the penalty, with the punishment. A punishment that they don't want to have come upon them. They have the fear of this punishment because they're fully aware that if their mask drops and the public finds out about the truth of what they are and what they've done, that they will all be hanging by their necks, because the people will make sure that happens, and we are lawfully able and authorized to take such action. So again, we have to understand there's a difference between tangible and intangible. The created is a tangible. The law, which is created, is intangible. The intangible can never change because it's created by limits. Because, in order to create something, you must place parameters of its existence. We create those parameters, and it's the law, right? So when we say that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise named crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury, that establishes parameters. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise named crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury, that establishes parameters. Right? That establishes parameters. And those parameters are that before you can arrest someone and hold them over for a capital or crime, the parameter is you must have an indictment by a grand jury. If you do not, and you exceed that, the only unlimited law that would exist would be God. And we aren't God. Only God is God. So only God has the sovereignty of creating the laws. We have the ability to create certain laws within our limited existence, right? That's why we're made in God's image. We can create laws too to limit, our existence, or to limit that which we create's existence. But that which is created just like us, we can't go on this roof and jump off this roof because we know that God has placed limits upon us by the law of gravity. So when we ourselves create the laws for that which we create, the judges, those judges also cannot go up on this roof and jump off of it because they're going to face penalties. Just like they cannot arrest someone and hold them over for a capital crime without an indictment by grand jury, because that must accompany penalties. And as we said before, the penalty is as prescribed by law. You're going to die. So when God says that don't eat the fruit of that tree, you will most certainly die, these public officials, they are very, very well aware that when you eat the fruit of treason, the punishment is death. They should read a bit more scripture and get caught up on this, because it's all explained to them, and they have an opportunity to be able to come back. I'm just trying to get them to understand that you're on a path that you're not going to want to go down. I'm trying to call these public officials back from the apostasy that they're on, right? But I can't save them. They have to save themselves. All I can do is warn them of what God has already told them, the parameters that have been placed upon them, and the punishment or penalty that's going to come with continued willful disobedience of the very thing that creates you. I will not go up on the roof of this building and jump off it because I respect my Creator. I respect the limits that He's placed upon me. I don't know why He told me that I can't, that I have gravity, that I'm going to die if I jump off a building, but I have to respect that because I know that that's a law that He's imposed upon me. If I choose to act out against that which created me, right? If I choose to act out against God and I exceed the limits that He's placed upon me, He's going to give me the penalty of death, the punishment of death. I don't want that to happen to me. So I respect Him. I love Him. I understand that there's certain reasons why He has placed these limits upon me, and it may be outside of my limited understanding, but I have to respect His sovereignty. I have to respect His authority. And the same thing can be said, guys, for these judges. They must respect that sovereignty of that which created them, the limits that were imposed and placed upon them. Because if they don't, then they are acting in direct disobedience of their Creator, the people of the United States. We created those judges in our sovereignty. Right? We gave them certain authority. Those authorities are limited and they're defined by the law. And when those that are created choose to willfully or negligently exceed the limits that are placed upon them by us, the Creator, then we must hold that which is created accountable for the breach of such obligations, such breach of the law. In the same way that God's going to hold us accountable for going up on this roof and disobeying Him and jumping off, we're going to fall to our death because we've willfully acted in disobedience to that which created us and the parameters and law that He has imposed upon us. Same thing for these judges and these prosecutors. They cannot exceed the very limits that have been placed upon them. So when you look again at the hierarchy, at the top is the sovereign people of the United States. We were sovereign. We were made free. We won a war. Now all of a sudden we're free. And while we're free, we came together and said, you know what? We want to place some limits on our existence so we can preserve our freedom. Right? We want to place limits on you and place limits on me, not to take away my freedom, but so that through my obedience to the freedom of all and the acceptance of the freedom of all, I myself can be free. Because if someone standing right next to me who was free can lose his freedom, then that would mean that I, within the same parameters of law, can lose my freedom. So if I want to preserve my freedom, the only way I can do it is by protecting and defending the freedom of those around me, because that would be a requirement. Because if I permit someone to enslave someone that's free like me, then by my disobedience, by my permitting of that, then I myself am permitting that same agent to be able to enslave me. See, again, rights always drive men as duty act. Where there is no duty, there cannot be right. So if we want to claim the right to be free, then there must be an accompanying duty. It must be, because you can't have a right that exists without a duty. So if I have the right to be free, then that would mean that I would have the duty to defend freedom. And if I breach my duty or my obligation of defending freedom, then by my breach of obligation, I will have given up or surrendered my right to be free. Because this is all part of the criminal conspiracy concept. If I'm aware that someone's breaking the law, right, and I choose to do nothing about it, then I myself might as well be the very person breaking the law because I permitted it to continue. So with these judges, right, the people of the United States are responsible for these crimes being committed by these judges. They're responsible for them. And they know about these crimes being committed because we see on the news. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, the poor man that was murdered by those corrections officers in New York, the whole master should have held all of them accountable for that. And yet, firing is an effective, punishment for murder, gang murder, right? It's not okay. But the people must hold their agents accountable. And if the people do not, then by their negligence or by their failure to make the agents accountable for the exceeding of the limits that the law has imposed, then the people themselves are responsible. They're permitting it. The only reason why the judges are able to break the law is because the people of the United States are permitting them to do so, which means that the people of the United States are in a conspiracy right now to undermine the very laws that they created and the limits that they've imposed upon their agents. The people are responsible for these crimes. And unless the people are willing to step up and hold their agents accountable for the crimes, then they're all traitors because they're permitting treason to occur, right? Willfully or negligently. They're engaged in a criminal conspiracy to undermine the very laws that they are claiming to represent and defend and uphold. They're not. They're not. Because again, the law must have certain punishment. Because without punishment, the law has no. They're not. Because again, the law must have certain punishment. Because without punishment, the law has no existence. So if there is no enforcement, if there's no fear of punishment that accompanies the law, then the law it doesn't exist. It's gone. Poof. Right? Because the law only exists because there are limits that are placed upon it, the parameters. Again, if the law of gravity were limitless, then I wouldn't have fear of jumping off the top of this roof. But it has parameters. And those parameters cannot be exceeded because they've been set, right? They've been set. Just like we create the law, certain laws within our existence to preserve and protect our rights and our freedom and all these things. When we place those parameters upon certain individuals to enforce, so that there is a fear of punishment, then those that are there to enforce it, they can't exceed, once again, the parameters that created them without their own fear of punishment. We have to find a way. We have to find a way to deal with the criminality of our leadership. That's what this whole thing is about. That's what I mean. I'm stumbling through the dark, you guys. You get that, right? I mean, for 243 years, we've had leaders that think that they are limitless, that think that they can exceed the power, authority, statutory conferred upon them, right? Because they are sovereign, right? Because they're the leaders, because they're, so fucking amazing and whatever. But again, we, the people, in our sovereignty, created their authority, right? They created their law. That law has parameters. It's written in the law. And those parameters cannot be exceeded by that which created it, because that which created it cannot exceed itself without its creator changing it. The people must change the parameters of the law. And if we don't, the judges cannot change that, because they exist in a lower realm from what we created. And that which is created cannot change its own creation. Only the people can change the Constitution. No judge can change it. Only the people can, because the people created the Constitution before any judge existed. No, judges only exist because we, in our sovereignty, created the limits to which the judges will operate within, the realm that they're going to be within. So, again, the decision will come from the court, you guys. It will come from the court. But the battle is fought in the opinion of the public. We have to deal with the public first. We have to raise their awareness of the reality of the situation, because it's a very simple concept. The judges are breaking the law because you people are permitting them to do it. And as long as you permit them to do it, then you are responsible for it. Right? The master is always going to be responsible for the agent's actions. And if these judges are killing people because the people are the people of the United States are giving them absolute impunity because they don't have or don't impose a punishment for the exceeding of the laws they created, that's not a very good creator, right? My God is an honest God, because he's not going to punish me, if I am obedient to him and I respect him. But he sure the hell is going to punish me and be truthful to me, because he has to be. Because that creates a tangible world. That creates a statutory world, one that isn't fluid, one that we can predict and we can move through, because we do have certain limits that we can live within those limits and know that our life and future will be sure and certain, because we know the parameters. That would be a good God. That would be a good creator that's helping us. But a bad creator would be one that's going to set limits, create the object, and then say, oh, that's a moving object. You can do whatever you want, right? We're going to permit, the exceeding of these limits. And that's not what should be happening. The people of the United States need to understand that the law itself that you created is intangible. And that law is a double-edged sword. It will cut one way, but it will most certainly cut the other way. It's the other way that we got to cut right now. We have to go the other way, because that's the way that has not been exercised yet. That's the element of enforcement that they have no fear of, because the people can cut the opposite direction. The law is going to cut both ways. So when the people realize that all their agents are committing crimes and treason and not obeying the law, then the people will hold them accountable. But the only way we get there is we've got to bring the awareness to the people, and we've got to make them understand that the limits that the law established are being exceeded by something that has no authority to exceed them. And that which exceeds them can't be protected by them because they're already operating in a realm outside of the law. Therefore, the law can't protect them in an area that the law doesn't exist. If you act unlawfully, the law can't protect you from your lawlessness. So stewards of power. I have certain power that God has granted to me. You have certain powers that God has granted to you. You have certain powers that the law has granted to you, right? If you exceed those powers that has been granted and conveyed to you, if you exceed the powers that have been given to you, then again, you are no longer an agent of that law. Because if the law permits me to bear arms, I have the right to have a gun. And that right to have a gun is so that I can defend myself against, threats of harm or injury. And if I exceed that and I decide that I'm going to exceed my right of being able to defend myself, and I'm now going to attack you, thus breaching my limits of the power, then I'm now operating outside of my authority, what the law has granted to me. And now I'm in an area of unlawfulness, and therefore the law cannot protect me. The law will protect me as long as I'm operating within its parameters. If I have the right to bear arms and I go and buy a gun and I go out and I carry that gun and you attack me, I can use that gun as a mechanism because the law is protecting me. But if I exceed that and I act outside of my lawful authority of protection and I decide that I'm going to abuse it to take something from you through an abuse of power and a force of this weapon, I decide that I'm going to abuse it to take something from you through an abuse of power and a force of this weapon, in a manner in which it was not designed to be used, then I am operating outside of the law. And if I operate outside of the law, I cannot be protected by the law. Thus, I am committing a crime. When the power to imprison is granted onto a prosecutor, that prosecutor can only use that power in certain conditions. They cannot exceed those conditions because that would be an abuse of power. That would be acting outside of their lawful limits of the law. So when the Constitution says that the prosecutor is responsible to find you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, to investigate and to bring you to a trial by jury, and that's what the law requires of them, then when they decide to operate outside of those limits of lawful authority and come to you and threaten you that they're going to impose additional prison time or additional charges to you, right? So that they don't have to operate within the parameters of the law and thus not have a trial by jury and not find you guilty beyond reasonable doubt, and instead just simply advance their desired financial interests through a direct breaching of their lawful authority. They are operating in a realm outside of the law. Thus, they are breaking the law, and the law will not protect them. And once again, once the court creates that judgment or that finality, it was created by something that did not have authority to do it. Again, once the court creates that judgment or that finality, it was created by something that did not have authority to do it. Therefore, the court will not grant the existence of it because the court can't permit an existence of something that it itself cannot create. A judgment that's created outside of the court's lawful authority, the court will not protect it because the court and the law are intertwined. They are intangible objects that do not change fluidly because they're not living. The only way that they can be exceeded would be by the agent and the free will of that agent who has willfully chosen to disobey that which limits it. It's creation. It's creator. So this whole concept of sovereignty, we've got ways to attack it directly because it's not in the Constitution. It was never in the Constitution. It was created by a judicial edict and fiat back in 1890 by a court that wanted to advance the slavery institution. And sovereign immunity was nothing more than an extension of the Dred Scott ruling, because what Dred Scott was that the court did not want to permit this slave to be able to challenge his slave owner in federal court for his freedom. So they had to say, oh, slave, you are not a person, and thus you have no standing in federal court, because in order to challenge it, you must be a person. So if we can find a way to say that a slave is not a person, then now you don't have standing, you can't bring a case in federal court, thus a slave cannot sue for his freedom in federal court. That was what Dred Scott was all about. 1857, the precursor to Civil War. That's what the Supreme Court of the United States decided, was that slaves are not people. Thus, they have no standing in federal court. Go away. We don't have to make this decision because we don't want to set the slaves free. That started the Civil War. That was the precursor to it. Then the 14th Amendment comes in, and they tried to technically overrule the Dred Scott ruling and make sure that, oh no, everybody's a person. You're born and naturalized here. You are a person. All right, you're going to be granted all the rights. We're not gonna live in a world where some people aren't people because the judicial branch wants to be a bunch of douchebag, slave owners and advance their financial interests. Our Congressman Bingham, Senator Howard, they knew when they were drafting the 14th Amendment that that's what they were trying to deal with. But the court created sovereign immunity in 1890, case Hans versus Louisiana, and they created it because if the state became the slave owner, which it did under the 13th Amendment, because who decides what is or is not aberrant behavior? Well, that would be the state. Okay, it also decides or investigates what is or is not aberrant behavior. It also brings the accusation against you of what is or is not aberrant behavior. It judges you as to whether or not you're guilty of such aberrant behavior, and then it profits off of your aberrant behavior in a for-profit industry for the direct benefit of the state. I would say that means that the state itself has become the slave owner. Well, if the slave owner is now the state, a state is nothing. State's an intangible object. It's another one of those things that has no life and therefore it can't own property. And if a slave is property, then we got to figure out a way to make that state a person, because only people can own property. Thus, Santa Clara County, and now corporations are granted personhood because they need to be able to own their property and preserve their property. And now, guess what? Slaves, you can't sue your master because you're nothing more than property. Corporations are never supposed to be people. Intangible objects were never supposed to be people because God didn't create a fucking corporation, didn't give it existence and self-awareness. But yet, that's what the court did. They did it so that they can preserve and protect the property of the slave owner, because the slave owner is now a state. But the sovereign immunity was, once again, the direct extension of Dred Scott, because in 1890, they said, well, if the state's now a slave owner, well, we made them into a person. That's the first good step. Now, the next step is let's make it so you can't sue your master in federal court by granting them sovereign immunity. So the court didn't actually read the Constitution, and they said it quite clearly in Hans versus Louisiana. They said, well, we don't read the Constitution literally. It doesn't say what we're saying it says, but we are saying that we believe that its meaning and purpose was that the states are immune. Therefore, slaves, you cannot sue your master in federal court, thus making the slave owner immune and a direct extension of the Dred Scott ruling. Okay. Cash App is We Shall Be Free. Guys, that's the only Cash App that I have. I'm so sorry that people are coming out and they're asking for money. I can't change that, guys. This is how it's going to be. I have the website and I want people to go to that website, but it's We Shall Be Free. That's WESHALLBEFREE. And it is 11:06. I'm going to have to get off here in just a moment, guys, because I do have to check out. I don't know where I'm going yet. God is going to lead the way. So again, if the law is leading me, the Cash App, We Shall Be Free, WESHALLBEFREE. And I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I'm about 20 miles from the nearest bus station, 30 miles from the nearest train station. There is no Uber, no cab. And I'm kind of wondering what the fuck was I thinking when I went to this place here. But we'll get through it. But for me, guys, for you guys to understand the world that I live in, it's not an easy world. I get that. You guys want answers because maybe you guys aren't living in this tangible world that you can't see that I'm having to live in, because I'm relying upon something that I can't see, because I know that it's the only thing that's going to get me through this, right? It's given me a destination, and I want to reach that destination as quickly as possible, but the only way I can reach it is by doing things that don't make sense to me, right? And every day I got to wake up and I got to be like, okay, well, what do I need to do? Because I have to find a path. I know that there's a path. I know that God's going to get me there. If I know that there's a destination, then I know that every single day there's going to be things I'm going to have to do, and I don't want to mess this up, you guys. I don't want to mess it up. Therefore, it's good that days like today, because God's saying that you're not here anymore. You have to move. So He's placed certain limits upon me, the laws, and I accept those limits because I know that they're for my good, right? I know that they're for my better future. I know that they're laws that are created by God that's going to set certain parameters. I'm going to accept those parameters and those limits because I know that they're leading me to a good place. The law is not bad. The law is not bad. Even the laws that man created, they're not bad, right? But we can choose to be obedient to him. I don't have to be subjected to him. I could go out and get a job. I could live a life. I could live as a normal human being because I myself am trying to reach a destination that I myself have decided I'm going to go to. But I kind of like God's destination a little bit better because God's destination is a much bigger blessing for a lot of people. And I want to see that happen for the country. I want to see that happen for you. So I don't live within the world where I am in control, where I'm going to get the outcome that I want, because that would be me. That would be about, and this isn't about me. So I accept the limitations that God has placed. I accept the laws that he imposes upon me. I subject myself to him because I know that they're for my good. I know that they're going to lead me to a better place. So as I wake up, yes, I can stress about the fact that today, I have to leave and I don't know how I'm going to get down the road. But you know what? I have a couple bags and I can always get there. It doesn't matter. And if I have to leave a bag, that's fine. God's going to give me more clothes when I get to the next location. I don't have to worry about anything because all I have to do is focus on the limits of the law that he's imposed upon me every single day and every single moment. And that keeps me within a path that I'm going to reach that destination. Because I'm not going to exceed it on my own, out of my own free will, because I'm going to accept the limits that he's placed upon me and not stress and know that this is simply here for my greater good. And we can all do that the same. We can say that the law is here not because I have to be obedient to it, but because I can subject myself to it, because it's here to help lead me, in a better direction. It's here to provide limits so that I can not infringe upon other people's future, so that I can, work together for everybody to reach the same ending, because we're all, working together within a society that's free. And the only way we can do that is by accepting the certain limits that the law imposes upon us, and that way this person's happiness is not damaged by my failure to be obedient to law, or this person's, property is not damaged because of my failure to be obedient to the law. I have my freedom and my ability to be free because I operate within the parameters of the law. I'm obedient to it by not hurting someone else or not damaging someone else, giving them their ability to be able to be free as well, because I myself choose willfully to subject myself to the parameters that the law has given me, so that I don't hurt or injure someone else or prevent them from being able to, find their happiness. And that's what we all need to do, you guys. We all need to accept the fact that this brother over here has the right to be happy. And I'm not going to impose on his environment to where he can't find the happiness that God has destined him to obtain. We all have that same right. We have the right or the free will to be able to breach the law. But we all need to understand that when we do, then we are going against that which created us. We are operating outside of our limited authority, and when we do, that must accompany punishment. That must have punishment. If I choose to infringe upon my brother's life, and so that he can't find his happiness, so that he can't do the things that God is permitting him to do and empowered him to do, then I myself must be punishable or accountable to God for such breach of the limits that he's placed upon me. No man has the authority to abuse or trod upon another man. God created that man. Man didn't create that man. God created that man. Gave him certain rights to existence, certain ability to live, and all these other 11:11, guys, 11:11. So 11:11. So we got the right to live. We got these things that God has given to us. Once we know what those are, guys, we have an obligation. God has imposed it upon us. We must defend the freedom of those around us. Because if we don't defend the freedom of those around us, then by our failure to defend freedom, by our breach of the obligation to defend freedom, we ourselves give up our right to be free. Okay? Because injustice that can occur anywhere can occur everywhere. So any freedom that we permit to be removed from one, it can now be removed from all. All right? So I'm gonna be writing a bit more on this. There's some real key concepts here on challenging sovereignty, and I like what God was doing with this morning. But I'm gonna get myself ready and start walking down the road. So I think I'm going south, wherever that might be. So Dallas, if you guys get ready for me, I think I'll be in Dallas next. Okay. And again, I know the destination. You all know the destination. We're on our way to that court. We're on a way to win our freedom, right? We have a path that's been laid out before us, but every single day we must live within the parameters that God has given to us. If we don't, then by our breach of those limits, by our breaking of the law that God has imposed upon me, we are not going to reach that destination. So every day I wake up and I find the path based upon the limits that God has placed upon me for that day. And if that means I don't have money, great, there's my limit. If that means I don't have a place to stay, that means that, great, this is where I'm supposed to be, right? If I don't have a vehicle, great, that means that maybe I'm not supposed to go anywhere. Regardless, the path will open up and I live within the parameters that God has established for me because I want to reach that destination, because I know that the only way I can do it is by obeying the limits that God has placed upon me. So I don't stress about not having money. I don't stress about not having a car. I don't stress about not having a hotel room. I don't stress about those things because I know that it's not going to change the destination. I'm going to operate within the limits that God has imposed upon me by the laws that He's put here, and those laws come every day. The law today is I don't have money. The law today is I got to check out this hotel room. The law today is I don't have a vehicle. But if I need to be somewhere, I know that the law will open up and permit me the ability to be able to do it. I just have to accept the fact that I must move. And lots of times that's the hardest part, because taking a step into the unknown, taking a step into something that's unpredictable, the moment I check out of here, most people would be highly stressed. I'm not, because I already know that every single time, every single place, the path opens up. Okay, they're knocking on the door. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you guys so much. Please like, follow, share, please comment, please donate if you can, and together we shall be free. Thank you guys so much. God bless. Yeah, I'm not ready yet.